And Amy, as we wind up National Rice Month, a case can be made for maybe some better rice prices. Brian will have some comments coming up on that. Also ahead in the markets, U.S. catfish processing is strong as October begins. Higher placements surprise some in the cattle trade, while wheat is possibly a big loser in the acreage battle for 2018. At the nation's pond banks, U.S. catfish producers received a price of $1.09 per pound for premium size live fish in August. That's down 12 cents per pound from a year ago. Farm sales popped up 9% compared to August of 16, and processor sales really took off, increasing over 13% compared to 1 year ago. The USDA says more cattle than expected were placed on feed in the month of August. Cattle trader Angie Setzer has come to the conclusion that it's live cattle, not feeders, that will be setting the tone for the entire complex in the coming days.
Feeders have been strong, but they seem to be plentiful. I've talked to a few of my cattle guys, and there hasn't been a shortage of feeders showing up at the sale, which is something that we've talked about pretty steadily for the last couple appearances of mine here because of the heifer retention and things like that. We knew that we were going to have a large introduction of calves into the marketplace. So yeah, I think live cattle are going to set the tone. We've got to see where cash goes. We have some room to feed them a little bit longer because weights haven't hit last year's levels, of course. You can't put them in the bin, unfortunately, to wait and capture that carry that's out there. You're going to bring them into the marketplace. But I'd really like to see some more interest on the cash side, and it's just been flat.
Well, it's time now for today's trivia quiz on Farm Week. We close out Rice Month with, you guessed it, a rice question. And here it is. Rice is produced in how many Mississippi counties? Here are the possible answers: 10, 17, 24, or 35 counties. We'll have that answer coming up. Harvest pressure continues to weigh heavily on the large U.S. crop of soybeans. At least one trader is somewhat convinced there is still some upside potential for beans. Here's Naomi Bloom's strategy.
If you are choosing to sell your beans at harvest, I would be very much interested in using some sort of a reownership strategy with them, because not only has there the potential to be the surprise of the yields really not being there at all, as we're all kind of in agreement on, but the upside potential is there, especially with Argentina starting their planting and it's wet. They've had 5 inches of rain, so it's not that perfect start down there. And now I've heard that in South America, they have to spray for rust 6 times a year. And so what happens when all of a sudden that just doesn't work anymore? And if the La Nina really comes in, you got production issues. So things have the potential to just perpetuate to the upside. And I think about that demand in China. 110 million metric tons is what they use, and 95 million metric tons is what is imported and supplied to them. So there's no room for error.
Many grain traders appear convinced now that the upcoming acreage battle is not looking good for winter wheat. Ted Seifert says in a 3-way race with corn and soybeans, the outcome is plain as day.
The loser there is wheat. And you look at the world carryover, and it gives us more reason to continue to cut those wheat acres. Although world carryover did come down just a slight bit here on the last report, which might be part of the reason why we reversed off the low there in wheat. But yeah, it's the one that needs to lose the most acreage, and soybeans and corn benefit from that.
The stage continues to be set for the kickoff of U.S. rice sales to China. Extension economist Brian Williams has some thoughts on that, as well as a recap of a new government snapshot of the rice market. What was most significant in the new Ag Supply and Demand report?
Well, the big thing here was lower supplies. Looking through the numbers on rice real quick, acreage was down by about 90,000 acres, and yields were lowered by about 9 pounds per acre. That gave us production, a lowered production of about 6.8 million hundredweight. Exports and domestic use were both down slightly, which ended up with slightly lower ending stocks as well.
What will the opening of the China market mean for U.S. rice exports?
Well, I think this has potential to have some major implications. When we look at the numbers, China's the largest producer of rice, and they're also the world's largest importer of rice. And so to be able to kind of get our foot in that door with China, it's
a major
lot
thing.
of potential there, yeah.
Now this will kind of be phased in, I understand, as far as the level of exports.
I think so. The big thing here is that anytime a new market opens, there's always some red tape that needs to be cut through, details that need to be worked out. So one thing with this is that China would like to send some inspectors here to look at our facilities, make sure that they're up to quality, which they should be, and then we can go ahead and start exporting. But on the flip side of things, being that China is such a huge consumer of rice, they consume enough to basically eat up our entire production, the U.S.'s entire production, in about 2 weeks. So because they're such a large consumer of rice, there's some potential once that door is open to see some sharp increases in exports going to China.
Sounds like it. Well, let's talk a little bit about storm damage over the summer, specifically Hurricane Harvey, Louisiana, a lot of rice there. Longer term, how is that going to impact the market?
Well, there's still a lot to be seen how it impacts our row crops. We've heard a little bit about cotton. We've heard about some of the food grains in particular. If it's been inundated with floodwaters, it can't be consumed. On the plus side, about 80% of the crop in both Texas and Arkansas had been harvested when the storm hit, so it was already in storage.
Back to the trivia quiz now as we wrap things up here in the markets. Rice is produced in how many Mississippi counties? Well, if you said B, 17 counties, you are correct. Bolivar County in the Delta, as you heard earlier in the program, is the top rice producer.